Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Ponick, and I'm the Education USA advisor here at the US-UK Fulbright Commission. And I'm excited to be hosting this webinar for you this evening about making the most of USA College Day. You are here because you have registered to attend our USA College Day event either next Friday or next Saturday, the 23rd or the 24th of September. And we're really looking forward to welcoming you there. Where you'll have the opportunity to meet with representatives from over 120 US universities. And so what I'd like to do in tonight's session to kind of prepare you for that is to give you a very brief introduction of studying in the US and what the process is for choosing a university, how funding works in the US, and what the application process is like. I'll talk a little bit about ways that we can support you as Education USA advisors at the Fulbright Commission. And then I want to talk about some tips for you making the most of USA College Day next weekend when you attend. And there will be time for questions at the end, which you'll be able to enter into the Q&A box. So I suggest that you hold any questions until the end, just in case I answer them as you go. So you might just want to make a note of them somewhere. And then at the end, I'll ask for you to go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A box. So as I said, my name is Sarah. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not originally from the UK. I'm from Chicago in the US, where I completed both my undergraduate degree and my postgraduate degree. But I've been living in London for the past 8 years and working at Fulbright for the past almost 6 years now. I also just want to apologize a bit in advance. I've got a 2-year-old son who brought a cold home from nursery at the end of last week. And I think I've come out just about on the other side of it now, but I'm a bit congested, a bit nasally. So apologies if any of that comes through over the course of the webinar. And thank you for your patience with me as I deal with that. And just to tell you a little bit more about who we are and the services that we offer. So we're the US-UK Fulbright Commission. We have been around for over 70 years. We were started by a man named Senator Fulbright, who thought that the best way to encourage kind of peace in the world would be to encourage cultural and educational exchange. So we came about from that. We're jointly funded by the US and the UK government to promote peace and cultural understanding through educational exchange. And we do that in a couple of different ways. One of the ways that we do that is actually by offering scholarships for postgraduate study and postgraduate research in the US and the UK. And we also offer an advisory service to assist students, parents, and advisors with applying to US universities. So the advisory service is part of the Education USA network, which is a Department of State network in the US of over 400 international student advising centers throughout the world. And our aim as Education USA advisors is to offer free and unbiased advice to help UK students to study in the US. And we're actually the only official source of US study in the UK. So if your hope is to study in the US, which is why you're here, you've come to the right place, and we're here to help you do that. And I'd like to touch on why you might be interested in studying in the US, because over 10,000 students go from the UK to the US for their studies each year. And you'll see some of the reasons up here on the screen. So first, the reputation and the variety and the quality of the institutions. So there's over 4,500 universities that offer undergraduate degrees in the States, compared to about 120 here in the UK. So within that 4,500, there's a huge range of personality and style. And you'll hear throughout this presentation that we'll really be encouraging you to pay attention to fit when you're looking at these universities, trying to find a university that's a good fit for you. With that many universities on offer, there's so many high quality universities that you've probably never heard of, some of which are going to be at USA College Day at the end of next week. And so we'll be talking about ways to kind of help identify those universities. Going to the US also offers an opportunity to experience campus life and activities. US universities are known for having a vibrant campus life and encouraging students to be involved outside of the classroom. This can include all sorts of different things. It can be kind of your typical extracurriculars like student government, or playing in like an orchestra or a band on campus, or taking part in intramural sports, or even just like going to cheer on the American football team. All of those different things are encouraged at a US university. American University in Washington, D.C. has a cheese club where students will go and try different cheeses and just kind of enjoy eating cheese together. So there's all sorts of ways to get involved at a US university and explore your different interests outside of the classroom. Another top reason that students choose to go to the US each year is the academic flexibility. In the US, we have something called the liberal arts curriculum, which basically is a well-rounded education. It means that you get to take classes in a variety of different subjects for your first 2 years at university before deciding what you want to major or specialize in. Some universities don't even allow you to declare a major until the end of your second year. And so that gives students really the opportunity to really explore, and they can start taking classes in something if they think that they're interested in it, make sure it's for them, and get that opportunity. Some students know already what it is that they want to study, and so many universities are going to let you start taking classes in that, but it also means that you'll have the opportunity to take classes in other subjects as well. So I like to speak about a student who I knew who loved computer science, knew that they wanted to study computer science, but also had this love for philosophy and was able to go to university, study computer science, but also take these philosophy classes alongside their computer science classes. Similarly, I knew a student who was really passionate about biomedical engineering, had taken all the classes kind of here in the UK to go for an engineering degree, went to the US, started their engineering degree, decided they didn't actually like engineering after all, that it wasn't what they wanted to study. And at that time had taken a class on feminism and ended up switching their major to a global gender studies major and studying that as well. So students here in the UK really love that opportunity to be flexible, to not know what you want to study or to explore their interests if you already know what you want to study. It really is a top reason that students choose to go to the US. And also, this might be surprising to some of you, but another top reason students choose to go to the US is the funding opportunities. I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail later on, but there are a lot of opportunities to find different types of scholarships in the US compared to the loan-based system that's here in the UK. Going to the US also offers you the opportunity to internationalize your CV. Studying abroad is something that's actually really appealing to employers. It shows that you've got a boldness to do something different, that you've got interpersonal skills, cross-cultural communication skills, that kind of thing. You also have the chance in the US to build networks of friends and professional contacts from around the world. And while you're in the US, there's a lot of student job opportunities. You can work 20 hours per week during term time and 40 hours per week, up to 40 hours per week during holidays, and then up to a year after graduation as well. And lastly, going to the US gives you the chance to learn about a new culture. The US spans 6 different time zones. It has a great diversity in geography and cultures, depending on where you are in the US. There's long summer holidays to explore. Living on campus is a great way to get to know the US culture. So all of these reasons are the top reasons that we hear from students about why they're interested in going to the US. And just to quickly touch on some of the key differences between a degree in the US versus the UK. You may already know this one, but typically in the US, the programs are longer. A bachelor's degree typically takes about 4 years compared to a typical 3 years here in the UK. When you apply to university in the US, you're typically applying to the university as a whole, as opposed to applying to a particular academic department. Again, that reflects that liberal arts curriculum where you might not be choosing a major until later, compared to your very course-specific degrees here in the UK. In the US, there's less government control over university. So that means that there's more institutional diversity and freedom, and which is great, but it also means that there's no set fees or centralized admissions process, which makes things a little different than they are here in the UK. It also means that the application process in the US is slightly longer and more in-depth, not just because of that, but also because the application process is more holistic. It's more than just being about grades. Your grades are still going to be very important, especially if you're applying to a highly competitive university, but they're also going to be looking at things beyond your grades. Your grades aren't going to be the only thing that they're looking at, and they'll be looking at other things as well. If you're interested in applying for funding from a US university, you're going to be applying for that alongside your application for admission, not once you're already admitted. So that's something that you'll be looking at from the very beginning of when you're choosing where to apply. And then something to be aware of is that law and medicine are studied at the postgraduate level in the US, as opposed to the undergraduate level as it's studied here in the UK. And this is a typical timeline that's really useful for students who are looking to apply to the US. We typically recommend beginning to research universities about 1 to 1.5 years before you're hoping to enroll in the US. And so if you're kind of in your final year of school right now, you want to be into this researching process right now. If there's any required admissions exams at the universities where you're planning to apply, some of you will have already taken those. If you're in your final year right now and you haven't taken those and the universities where you want to apply require them, you'll be registering for those very soon. And then in the autumn, the year before you plan to attend university, that's where you're going to be kind of finalizing your selection of where you're going to be applying. And we'll talk about some strategies of how to do this. And then throughout the autumn and the late autumn, you'll be putting together that application and submitting according to the deadlines of the universities. And then depending on when you apply, you can typically expect to hear back in kind of the winter, springtime from US universities about where you've been accepted. And then based on where you've been accepted, you can make a decision about where you hope to enroll. And you'll typically be applying for your visa kind of 1 to 3 months before you enroll at a US university. You'll also be at that point, if you've made it that far, you've enrolled, you've applied for your visa, you'll be coming back to us and maybe checking out some of our pre-departure resources, some of our webinars for students who are headed off to the US. And then we typically start your studies in the US around mid-August or early September. So it is earlier than it would be if you were here in the UK. Now I want to talk about a really important step in the process of applying to US universities, which is choosing a university. It's really important to think through this step, and the key is to be flexible. There's over 4,500 universities in the US, which means it's a daunting process to narrow down your prospects. But we're going to discuss some strategies that you can implement in the choosing process. And I hope that some of these strategies are going to be useful to you as you go around next week and meet with these representatives from more than 120 universities. Because there's probably a few universities that maybe you've heard of right now, but you probably haven't heard of all 120 that are coming. And so it's going to be really great for you to use some of these strategies to kind of learn more about those universities that are going to be there. So the first step in the choosing process is figuring out what factors are important to you in a university. And we focus a lot on the term fit here at the US-UK Fulbright Commission and at Education USA. What that means is finding the school and the program that's going to be the best fit for you and your personal and academic interests. And there's a lot of factors to consider both in and out of the classroom when you're thinking about fit. You're going to be thinking about things such as the types of programs and the departments that the institution offers, the location. You'll be thinking about the availability of funding, if funding is important to you. You'll be looking at the campus size. Do you want a smaller campus? Do you want a really large campus? You'll be thinking about the academic environment. Do you want a really rigorous and competitive environment where students are kind of competing with each other? Is that something that you thrive in? Or do you prefer to be in a more inclusive, supportive environment where everyone's supporting each other? So you'll start thinking about these factors, deciding with what's important to you more broadly and starting to prioritize these. As some further examples, if you're thinking about like location, if you don't like the cold and snow, then maybe the East Coast might not be the best fit for you. Are you trying to save money? Then maybe you won't be looking to live in an urban place where it's going to be more expensive than it will be to live in a rural place. And so here is where I kind of encourage you to think beyond rankings, but to start thinking about this variety of factors. And being aware that rankings in the US are not the same as in the UK. I know that they're very important here in the UK. They hold a lot of weight, but rankings in the US, they don't necessarily rate the quality of teaching or graduate prospects. Some give weight to how much money a university has, or they just invite universities to peer rank themselves. Rankings can be really useful tools, but they shouldn't be the only method that you use to choose a university. And so within the choosing process, you're going to be thinking about all of these factors, narrowing down your universities and making sure that you're only applying to universities that you've researched and could see yourself attending for up to 4 years if you're offered a place. Once you've figured out what factors are important to you, the next step is to use that information to begin researching universities. And unlike with UCAS, you're not limited to 5 universities. And in theory, you could apply to as many as you like. However, for time and financial reasons, we typically recommend applying to about 6 to 10 universities. And to jumpstart that process of choosing, we typically recommend narrowing the 4,500 institutions into a list of about 10 to 20 schools that could be a good fit for you. So how exactly do you go about doing that? So I really recommend checking out on our website. We have a whole choosing section and within the undergraduate guide. And in that section, we have a list of links to different search engines that you can use to help with this process of narrowing down your choices of universities. So you'll be able to kind of use those search engines, maybe put in some of those factors. Maybe you do have an area, a subject that you're interested in, you put that in, or you have a location that you're interested in, or you know that you're specifically only looking at universities that offer high amounts of funding. All of these different things can really help start narrowing that down. And then once you start narrowing down those options, you can research them further on the university website and reach out to them directly with a goal of ultimately selecting about 6 to 10 institutions where you'll actually submit an application. And we typically suggest applying to 2 what we call reach schools, where you'd be thrilled to attend, but it would be a challenge for you to get in. And note that if you're applying to ultra competitive universities like Yale, Stanford, Harvard, MIT, Caltech, that these are reach schools for everybody that's applying, just because that's how competitive they are. We also suggest applying to 3 to 4 match schools. We call them match schools, where your profile is roughly on par with the average applicants. And we also suggest applying to what we call 2 likely admittance schools. So think of this as being similar to a UCAS insurance choice, where your application is going to be very competitive. And the best place to find the most up-to-date information about these universities is going to be on their university website. And on the website, you might be able to find the profile of the average admitted applicant to see how you compare. You'll also be able to find out more information on different programs, maybe some campus virtual tours, student life, sports, student housing, financial aid, all those types of things to start getting a feel for the university and if it could be a good fit for you. And you'll also want to check out what resources they have for international students, since you're going to be an international student on campus. It's also worth checking out the university's social media channels so that you can get a feel for the college, a feel for the university personality, and see the different things that they're focused on. And something to keep in mind is that universities do like to hear from you. So if you're looking at all of these things and you're finding that you have questions about it that aren't answered, you can definitely reach out to them, call them, email them, but do make sure that it's the student that's reaching out as opposed to some other person reaching out, because it's the student that's going to be applying for admission to the university and the one that they'll be admitting in the end. So we want the student to be the one asking those questions and making that impression. So now that we've talked a little bit about choosing a university, I want to talk about funding your studies. And as you might imagine, this is one of the top things that we get asked about. So in this section, I'll quickly run through some of the different sources of funding that you can pull from and strategies that you can implement to find funding. So typically there's 4 sources of funding for study in the US. And to be quite upfront, the first is typically personal and family funds. So US universities do expect families to prioritize a student's education and invest in that education. And so typically students in the US, if their family has the income that allows them to do so, then they are putting money towards their child's education. But another big source of funding in the US actually comes from US universities themselves. There's 2 main types of funding that comes from US universities. There's both need-based aid and merit-based scholarships, which I'll explain in more detail on the next slide. But for now, it's important to know that it's going to vary how much need universities can meet. And so if financial aid is important to you, you'll need to make sure that you're looking for and only applying to universities that offer financial aid for international students. There's also external funding bodies, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a bit. And then lastly, we've got up here loans. We actually advise loans to be your final resort. You can't take UK student loans to the US, and you can only get a US-based loan if you have a US citizen or a permanent resident that can co-sign that loan for you. You can technically take UK third-party loans out, but we would caution you to be really careful around these because they tend to have really high interest rates, really strict payback terms that might require you to start paying back your loan before you've even finished your education and started earning. One thing to mention here is that if you are a US citizen or you have dual US citizenship, you can actually apply for federal funding and federal loans by completing a form called the FAFSA form online. So that's something to be aware of if you have US citizenship or dual US citizenship. And it's likely that you're going to have to pull from a combination of these different sources in order to fund your education. To talk a little bit more in a little bit more detail about university funding, this type of funding tends to be ideal because it doesn't usually have to be paid back. As I said, there's two main types of university funding. Funding that's likely to be awarded on the basis of financial need, which is based on a family's annual income, or merit-based scholarships, which can be based on things like academic merit, such as your A-level predictions, maybe your admissions test scores, or funding might be based on niche criteria or a combination of all these different things. As I said, need-based aid is based on financial need. So universities calculate a family's expected family contribution based on their income. And then they compare that to the total cost of attendance and they try to meet that gap. And it's going to vary how much of that gap they can meet. So some universities can meet 20% of the gap, some can meet 80%, some meet 100%. So look for this info while doing research if you need this type of funding to get to the US. And so just to explain, because I think this terminology is a little bit more confusing and it's easier for me to hear like a more of a specific example. Let's pretend that the university costs $50,000 US per year. And the university looks at your income and they determine that your family can afford to pay $10,000 per year. So now you've got this gap of $40,000 per year that you would need to attend. So a university that commits to meeting 100% of that gap is going to give you all 40,000 that you need to attend. But if a university can only commit to meeting 50% of that gap, then they're only committing to giving you 20,000. So you've got the 10,000 that your family is expected to pay, the 20,000 that the university is giving each year, and the 20,000 that you're going to have to figure out where that's going to come from for 4 years of university. So as you can see, if you're somebody who is applying for need-based aid based on your family's income, it's likely you're going to want to be looking at institutions that can meet 100% of your demonstrated need for international students, so that you're not left with this gap. And then keeping in mind that meeting 100% of need doesn't mean that they're paying 100% of everything. It means that they're looking at your family's income, determining how much your family can afford to pay, and then after your family pays that, they're paying for the rest. In terms of merit-based scholarships, these are something that, as I said, can be based on like academic merit. It can be based on maybe you've done a lot of volunteering, you're a leader in your classroom, or in your school community. Sometimes there's separate applications at universities for merit-based scholarships. Sometimes it's just built into the system. I know at my university, I was considered for merit-based scholarships just because I applied early to the university. So I was automatically considered for merit-based scholarships just by applying early. So that's kind of the thing that you'd be looking at. And especially if you're somebody who knows that you would be looking for some type of scholarship, but you're not sure if your family would qualify for need-based aid, or you're not sure how much need-based aid your family would qualify for, but you know that you're going to be wanting some money to kind of help support, then merit-based scholarships are going to be something that you're going to be looking at on these university websites. Again, first making sure that they offer them for international students. Most universities are going to be offering some form of merit-based scholarships for international students. So figuring out what those are, how much they offer, and then comparing that to kind of the cost of their tuition and their living costs, and getting a sense, okay, if you were to get this merit-based scholarship, that would help cut down the costs and how much would be left for your family to pay. So different things that you can start thinking about. Something else to be aware of is that if you're a top athlete, sports scholarships may also be available through the athletic recruitment process. And we have information available about that on our website. And at College Day next week, we're going to have somebody from one of the athletic associations in the US that's going to be hosting a stand. And so if that's something that you're interested in, you can go and speak to them about the athletic recruitment process. And as usual, for more information on university funding, check the university website, be proactive to find the information that you need. Often the process for applying for funding is going to be straightforward and integrated into the admissions application. And to talk to you a little bit more about external funding bodies, Funding bodies might include a wide range of professional, charitable, or government organizations that are external to the university. They can be thought of more as niche scholarships, as they usually have a specific criteria based on the mission of the funding body. So this could be that they've got a scholarship for people who come from a particular country of origin, particular ethnicity, particular religious faith, maybe an interest in a particular field or a gender, maybe certain interests or certain talents, those types of things. If you're unique in any way, there's likely a funding body with a scholarship out there for you. You just have to find it. So one example that I like to give is maybe you are a woman who's interested in engineering. There's probably a scholarship out there for women engineers. You just have to look for it. Typically, there are thousands of funding bodies, so searching for them will require time and a dedication to sift through scholarship listings and to submit separate applications to each body. And these tend to kind of be, not always, but external funding bodies tend to offer kind of smaller amounts that would contribute to your studies. So for this reason, we typically encourage students to first apply for university funding opportunities and then for external funding. That being said, there are some organizations that offer very generous scholarships up to the full cost of attendance at a U.S. university. One example of that is the Moorhead Kane Scholarship at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. This scholarship provides a 4-year, fully funded educational experience for students of the highest caliber, and they're specifically looking for students who hold qualities of leadership, character, scholarship, and physical vigor. So that's an example of like one really generous external funding body. And actually the Moorhead Kane scholarship at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill will actually be at College Day next week. And so you can go find out more about that at their stand if you're interested in hearing more about it. We do have a link on our website for all these different scholarship search engines. And so you can go to our website, look for those search engines, and you can use those to kind of sift through and start applying for scholarships there. There's some different approaches to a funding strategy that you could use to fund your studies. One strategy could be to explore universities and places with a lower cost of living. So just like in the UK, London is going to be more expensive than Lancaster. In the US, New York and California are going to be more expensive to live in than states like Ohio or Georgia. US universities will list on their website the full estimated cost of attendance. So that'll include the tuition, the fees, the cost of living, and personal expenses. So you could start scoping out places that have lower costs of living. You could also look at universities that have lower tuition. So institutions that have lower tuition are going to have lower costs. And as discussed, funding opportunities. So all of these are different approaches that you could use to put together a funding strategy and fund your studies in the US. I also want to very quickly mention community colleges, because these are increasingly a popular choice in the US as an alternative pathway that can help save a lot of money. Community colleges don't really exist in the UK in the same way. They generally award associate's degrees, which is not a degree that's offered in the UK. It's a 2-year degree that typically has a professional vocational focus. And then students can then use that 2-year associate's degree to transfer to a 4-year institution, complete an additional 2 years, and earn their bachelor's degree from that 4-year institution. And that's called a 2+2 transfer pathway, where a student starts their studies at a community college, transfers to the 4-year university, and then receives that bachelor's degree. A lot of universities have transfer agreements. And so you'll see on the screen here, the example is Los Angeles Valley College, which is a 2-year community college in LA that has a partnership with universities like UCLA, University of Southern California, and Cal Poly. Community colleges are much less expensive than 4-year universities. You can save thousands by paying a significantly lower tuition rate at a community college for the first 2 years of your studies. They also tend to have smaller class sizes, which can be really valuable for those introductory classes where you're taking classes in a lot of different subjects. And it also means you get more contact with professors. Community colleges often have less rigorous application processes and entry requirements than a 4-year university. So these can also be a really good option for students with BTEC or OCR, or other similar qualifications. They don't typically require exam scores for admission either. And there's more information about community colleges on our website, including a link to a webinar that we held about them. And at College Day next week, there's going to be some community colleges in attendance. And so definitely check them out if it's something that you're interested in hearing, at least hearing more about and hearing what they have to offer. So now that we've talked about funding, I'd like to talk about completing an application, very briefly talk about this, and then I can go into more detail in the Q&A section if you all have any questions about that. So first and foremost, what are US universities looking for? And first, they're going to be looking for academic achievement, which is going to be measured by your results. So your GCSE results or your National 5 results, and then any A-level predictions or any hires or advanced hire predictions. Those are all things that they're going to be looking at to kind of get a measure of your academic achievement. If they require an admissions exam score, they'll also be looking at that to measure your academic achievement as well. As I said, you can typically check on the university website for an example of the average applicant profile to see how you might compare. It's important to keep in mind, though, that however, academic achievement alone is not going to guarantee entrance to the most competitive US universities, and the process is going to be much more holistic than it is in the UK. So if you're thinking of these, the really ultra competitive universities that are in the US, everybody who's applying to that university has the top grades and the top test scores. So how exactly do those universities differentiate? And even if you're not applying to those top universities, maybe you're applying to other universities knowing that you don't have those top scores, but you're trying to stand out in other ways. How do you stand out in different ways? So some other things that universities are going to be looking at is your academic fits. So they're going to be looking for reasons for pursuing a degree at their institution, looking at how it might help you towards your goals. So if you're looking to apply to NYU, for example, you're going to, in your application, make it really clear about why it is that you're applying to NYU. And you're not going to want to be just talking all the time about how you love New York and you want to be in New York, because then the person reading it at NYU might say, okay, well, there's lots of universities in New York. Columbia is in New York. There's other universities in New York. What is it about NYU that you are particularly interested in? Is there a particular program? Is there a particular campus activity or a mission? So you'll be kind of looking for reasons that this particular institution is somewhere that you want to be. They'll also be looking at your extracurriculars. As I said, this is kind of a big focus in the US because they're all about educating a person both outside of the classroom as well as in the classroom. And so they're interested in knowing how you spend your time outside of the classroom currently. This doesn't mean that right now you have to be involved in every single extracurricular. It just means that US universities are interested in how you spend your time outside of the classroom, and they want to see that come through in your application. They'll also be getting a sense of your personal attributes. This is a holistic admissions process, and universities are looking to diversify their campuses and classrooms, and they want to know who you are. So they'll be looking at things like interests in your academic field of choice. If you already have an idea of something you want to study, they might be looking for some examples of your character, your leadership abilities through all the different parts of the application. And what exactly does this application entail? So unlike the UK, you will be applying to each university individually rather than through a centralized body like UCAS. And students can apply to as many as possible, as many universities as they want. But for time and cost purposes, we typically recommend applying to about 6 to 10 institutions. There is something called the Common Application that around 900 universities use in the US. It's a system that helps kind of streamline some of that demographic information that would be on an application form. It's not the same as UCAS in that you're still going to have to tailor all of your applications to each university. They might have some different questions asked. They might have some different supplementary questions, but you are going to be able to kind of put like all of your information about like your name and your address. You'll have one main essay that goes to all the universities that you apply to through the UCAS, through Common App. And so it can help streamline some of that. Something to keep in mind is that there's no standard process for applications or deadlines or requirements, and it varies by university. And each university does set its own deadlines and application requirements. So that's just something to pay attention to. However, most applications are going to follow a similar format. Most of the deadlines are going to be around the same time. So you'll be able to reuse or adapt the materials that you prepare for each. Most applications are going to include an application form with your basic demographic information. Some universities might require an admissions exam score. So that's something that you can do some research on. See if the universities where you're applying even require an admissions exam. More and more universities are making it optional now. And so you might decide that if it's optional, you're actually going to, instead of spending lots of time and money studying for an admissions exam, you might instead spend that time doing research on the university and putting together a really strong application for that university instead. You also will be, your school is going to submit something called a transcript, which is just going to be a list of your marks. So your GCSE results or your National 5 results, any A-level predictions or any hires or advanced higher predictions. That's something that your school will produce, and we have a template for that on our website if your school has never done that before. You'll also be required to write 2 to 3 essays. These are going to be different from your UCAS essay. They're going to be questions that are more about you and understanding who you are. Again, on our website, we've got lots of tips about how to do this. And we also have links to example essays. Some universities will actually put up on their websites successful essays from students who are now currently attending their university. I find it really useful to read through some of those example essays and just get a sense for how the essay is different in the US than it is here in the UK. You'll also be asked to get 2 to 3 recommendation letters from people at your school, from school representatives who know you well in and outside of the classroom. And then lastly, there's going to be an application fee of $50 to $100 per application. Although depending on your family circumstances, it might be that you're able to apply for a fee waiver. So that is the application in a nutshell. Lots more information available on our website, and happy to answer more questions when we get to the Q&A section if you've got any more in-depth questions about that. And before I move on to making the most of USA College Day, I just want to talk about a little bit more about ways that we can help you, both in the next week leading up to College Day, but also beyond as you're going through the application process for applying to US universities. And first and foremost, our website, some of you may have already spent a significant amount of time on it, but if you haven't, really recommend checking it out. We've got all sorts of information and advice and guides that can go into more detail than I've gone into in this session here. So you'll go into the USA section. There's a whole undergraduate guide with details on choosing, funding, and applying, and all those different links and examples that I've been talking about throughout this presentation. We take questions by email, so you can email us at advising@fulbright.org.uk and have the answer to your question responded to there. We also offer video appointments, not just at the moment because the team is really busy preparing for College Day next week. And so we haven't had the capacity to be offering these video appointments this month, unfortunately, but we're hoping that in October we can make those appointments available. And so you can go onto our website on the Contact Us page and scroll to the very bottom, and there'll be a link there. So kind of check back in October time if you are interested in booking a one-to-one video appointment with an advisor and kind of asking more in-depth questions and talking to us there. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions as you go along in the process. In the meantime, if you have any questions that aren't answered tonight and that you're interested, make sure to come and ask us at USA College Day. We're going to have an advising zone. I will be there in a red shirt. And so you can come and speak to me or one of my colleagues and ask any questions to us in the advising zone next week in person as well. We also offer various events about studying in the US, such as this webinar, such as USA College Day next week. We'll have a series of webinars probably over the coming months that are available on our website, so check back for some of those. We attend various events in person. So for instance, we'll be at the What Uni Live fair in London in November, so you'll be able to come along and speak to us there at that. So keep an eye on our website for any other further events about studying in the US. And if you are currently in year 12 or the equivalent, so maybe you're in Northern Ireland and tuning in and you're in year 13, or maybe you're in Scotland and you're in S5. And if you attend a state school and you are a high achieving student from a low income background, then the Sutton Trust US program might be a program that's of interest for you. This is a program that's run at the US-UK Fulbright Commission in partnership with the Sutton Trust. It allows students to explore US study by taking part in some residentials here in the UK in the spring of year 12 or the equivalent. And then over the summer, before their final year of school, students have the chance to visit US universities. not the last couple of years because of COVID, but hopefully next summer they will be going back to the US, stay on campus at a US university, visit other US universities in the area. And then if students are interested in applying to universities in the US in their final year, they can apply for continued support through the program to apply to US universities, not only for the admission, but they can also apply for the funding at the US universities that they would need. The program is free to take part in for students who are accepted. So if you think that that is something that you might be interested in and you want to find out if you're eligible for, you can go to the website. I think it's us.suttontrust.com. Otherwise, you can go to our website and find the link to the Sutton Trust US program. All right. And now I want to talk a little bit more about making the most of College Day, which you hopefully are all excited to be attending next week. I know I'm very excited to have you all there. And so I'm going to talk about ways to kind of prepare and some tips, and then I'll open up the floor for questions after that. So first and foremost, get prepared. We have more than 120 universities attending. You can see the list of those universities up on our website. We also now have the event program available up on our website, so you can take a look at what universities are going to be there. Take a look at all sorts of information. You can actually filter on our website. It's actually a search tool that you can use, so you can filter by available majors, by campus setting, by types of funding, and those other details that are important to you. So thinking back to when I was talking to you earlier about finding your fit, maybe spending some time in this next week thinking about what types of universities you're looking for and using that search engine to maybe help you find some universities. There might be some that you already have in mind, but there might be some that are similar to that you've never heard of before. And you can make sure that you are kind of using the search engine to research those and make sure that you get a chance to speak to them. You can also look at their university websites in advance and take some notes to show that you've done your research. Make sure that you're looking out for a range of universities in the event program. Well-known universities that you've heard of are probably going to be among the most competitive, with acceptance rates of less than 10%. But there's a great variety of excellent universities at College Day that could be a perfect fit. So don't let yourself get hung up on just coming, you saw that this one university that you like and you're just coming to speak to them. Make sure that you're taking in full advantage of all the different universities that are on offer and speaking to ones, because it's I speak to students every year who go through this process thinking, they're interested in the US because they've heard of this one institution or this other institution that they're interested in. And then as they go further into the process, they actually find all these other universities that they've never heard of before. And many of them end up going to these universities in the US, and they really love their experience there. So that could be you. Really also recommend kind of having a plan. So you're probably not going to be able to visit all 120 universities. So if you are kind of thinking about those factors that are important to you and using that search engine on our website to kind of do some filtering, you'll at least be able to narrow it down. That doesn't mean that on the day you can't just kind of start going and speaking to different representatives, because you might just coincidentally come across the university that way, but it might kind of help you narrow down which of the universities you're going to spend your time talking to. On the day, so all of you will have registered on Eventbrite for your Eventbrite ticket. So on the day, we typically recommend arriving like up to 30 minutes before your time slots. And the reason for that is because that we kind of line everybody up outside for that specific time slot. We kind of check all your tickets, check all your bags, because there's security in place. And so they're just kind of doing bag checks as part of a security check. We give you an event program. And so recommend kind of arriving. And then when your time slot hits, so if you're signed up for 11 a.m. on Saturday, that way, you get there at 10:30, you're standing in line, you're looking at your event program, your ticket's been scanned, and then at 11 a.m. on the dot, we let everybody in for the 11 a.m. time slot, and you go inside. And you can spend that time in line kind of reading through the event program and planning your time in the fair. In terms of what to bring, so you'll want to be ready to show that Eventbrite ticket. You don't have to have it printed or anything. You can just show it on your phone. If you are a student, you're also going to be sent a Strive scan barcode. And so that barcode, the people, the staff members who are checking you in are going to be scanning that barcode. And you're also going to be using that barcode when you're inside the fair to share your details with US universities. So you'll have your Eventbrite ticket. And then if you're a student, you'll have a StriveScan barcode. And if you are not a student, if you've signed up as like a parent or an advisor or as other, then you won't receive a barcode. And so you'll just be showing your Eventbrite ticket, whereas students will have their Eventbrite ticket and their StriveScan barcode. Recommend kind of preparing some good questions in advance. If you've been spending time on the research, on the website, doing that research, you can think of some questions. And you may wish to bring like a notebook and a pen to write down. There's also room at the end of the event program, I think, for you to take some notes. And so you could just bring a pen if you want to take your notes directly in the event program. When you're at the fair, remembering that Education US advisors like myself are going to be there to help. So I will be standing in the big advising zone in my red shirt, along with other staff members and volunteers. So if you have any questions on the day about the process of applying to US universities, you'll be able to speak to me. There's also going to be different seminars throughout the day to learn more. And there's if you go to our website, we now have the schedule of seminars available. So there's different seminars on topics such as how to write a US admissions essay, funding in the US, liberal arts and sciences in the US, and how that works in the US. Those types of topics are all how to stand out in a US admissions pool. And so you can go online and take a look at the seminar schedule and see which ones are going to be happening at the time that you're going to be there. And you may wish to attend one or two of those seminar sessions. And then I highly recommend visiting the booths of at least 5 universities that you've not previously considered. I can't stress this enough about how important it is to just be doing some research and learning more about places that you've never heard of before. I always like to talk about comparing it the other way around. So like as a US person who's come to the UK, when I first came to the UK, I had heard of Oxford and Cambridge, and that was about it. And if you had told me that Oxbridge was a university, I probably would have believed you. And so I had never heard of like incredible institutions like UCL or York or Bristol or Imperial, all these places that are really great universities, but I just never heard of them before because I was in the US and I wasn't exposed to UK universities. And so it's going to be the same for you. There's all these incredible universities that are in the US that you've probably never heard of before. And I mean, even just thinking the top 1% of 4,500 universities, that's over 40 universities, right? You probably can't name over 40 universities off the top of your head that are in the US. And so really encouraging you to branch out and to explore the different universities on offer. I also recommend that when you're speaking to representatives, be strategic. Oftentimes the person who is going to be coming from the US and standing behind that table is the person who's in charge of reading applications from the UK. Not always, but oftentimes. And so it might very well be that if you apply to that university, that you are speaking with the person who's going to be reading your application. And so making a good impression and asking good questions and can be a really good way to kind of build a relationship with them, to kind of maybe follow up with an email afterwards to say, really nice to meet you. If I have any other questions, I'll be sure to reach out, all that kind of thing. And again, students should be leading the conversation here, right? It's the student who's going to be applying to the university, the student who's going to be getting admitted to the university. And we want the admissions officer to remember the student and not the parents necessarily, or whoever is there supporting the students. And so would really encourage the student to kind of take the lead on this. And you can register your interest with the university by asking them to scan your barcode. So again, if you're a student, you're going to have a little StriveScan barcode, and you will ask universities to kind of scan that barcode, and then they will have your information so that they can kind of send you further details about their university and anything that they might want to send you. And then, yeah, don't hesitate to, I guess if you're feeling a little bit nervous about some of what I've just said, like feel free to like kind of practice your introduction, prepare essential questions, using our tips for choosing a university. You might want to mention who you are, when it is you're hoping to enroll at a US university, maybe some of the areas that you're interested in studying. Take advantage of this unique time that you as a student have to make connections with the admissions and university staff that are there. So yeah, those are some of my top tips. We've got more available on our website, so feel free to check those out there. But I want to stop there just because I want to make sure that I leave at least a little bit of time here for questions from anybody who has any questions. So if you do have any questions, do feel free to kind of put those in the Q&A box now, and I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can, you can see me and I can answer some of these questions. And I'll probably try to prioritize ones that seem like they're going to be the most helpful to the whole group, so that I can help the most people at once. But if you do have a very specific question and we have time to get to it, I will. Otherwise, you can either send us an email or you can try and catch me or one of my colleagues at the fair next week. So we've got a question from somebody who's saying, how many people from the UK get into ultra competitive universities like Harvard each year? And what backgrounds do they tend to hail from? This person's from a state school and comes from a low income background, so maybe hasn't had as many extracurricular activities, but wants to, is interested in applying to universities like, is interested in applying to a university like Harvard, was wondering if state school candidates tend to do well in the admissions process. And so what I would say to that is, as I've said, US universities are looking to have a diverse student body. They want lots, they're looking for the whole idea of this liberal arts curriculum and having well-rounded students also means that they want students from all different backgrounds on their campus. So they don't want all of one type of student. So they are going to have students from state schools. They're going to have students from independent schools. Universities like Harvard, pride themselves. I would imagine that they typically have a student from all 50 states in each incoming class each year. They probably try to bring in students from as many different countries each year. Students from the UK do get into Harvard each year, but if you think about how many students from the UK are applying to a place like Harvard, you might not, you'll want to make sure that there's something that's going to stand out in your application if you're applying to a university like Harvard. That doesn't necessarily have to do with, they're going to be looking at you in the context of your application. So if they see that you're from a state school, and your school is going to be providing some documentation, so your school is probably going to say something such as, our students from our school tend to come from low-income backgrounds. They don't have as many extracurricular activities, or if it's specifically about your family circumstances, they might write that about you. And so the university is going to be taking that all into context and understanding that. That being said, you may just also wish to diversify your options. Like, what is it about Harvard that you're interested in? Why, what is it about that university? And if you can figure out what it is about Harvard that you're interested in and figure out what other universities might also have those same features, then it might be that you're also able to apply to some universities that maybe don't have as many British students applying, and that way you can increase your chances of applying. It doesn't mean you can't apply to Harvard, because you can, and you should if it's something that you're interested in, but it just means you might want to apply to some other universities alongside that to kind of maximize your chance of going to the US, if that's what your ultimate goal is. Another question. Somebody is interested in top universities that specialize in swimming. Where can I find this info? So on our website, we have a whole section about sports scholarships. And so I would recommend going to our website, fulbright.org.uk, just putting in the search term sports scholarships to kind of go, it might come up as like athletic scholarships. And on that page, we have all sorts of information about, I realize you're not necessarily talking about applying for a sports scholarship, but you are talking about a sport. But on that page, because we have lots of information about sports scholarships, that also includes links to different websites that can tell you what universities are known for specific sports. And so I would check out, I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head, but there's a few different websites on there. And I know there's one where you kind of click through and you're able to say, like, I'm really interested in looking for, the institution that offers the best men's swimming or the best women's swimming. And so you can see which institutions are kind of known for offering those high level sports. You can also stop by, for anybody who's interested in learning more about athletics and the athletic recruitment process, you can visit this. There's going to be a stand next week from the NCAA, one of the athletic associations in the US, at the fair. They'll be located with us there in the advising zone. And so you can go and speak to them to ask any further questions about that. Okay. Surprisingly, those are the only questions that are in the Q&A box at the moment. Oh, there we go. We've got some more questions now. Somebody is asking for questions. This particular person is wondering if they're mildly dyslexic but sufficient to qualify for extra time in exams. Is that likely to play against you? And is there a list or ranking of strong academic universities publishing a percentage of dyslexic students? Those are really good questions. I am not aware of any kind of list or ranking of universities that kind of make that available. You may have already done this already, but I would recommend just doing like some basic Google searching. I would also just kind of, in terms of doing the typical choosing your university, like thinking about these are factors that are going to be important to you, and it's a great way to help kind of narrow down your choices. So alongside the other factors that you're thinking about, when you start narrowing down that list of universities, going onto each university website and seeing what types of resources they have available for students, for dyslexic students, and reaching out to the university if the information isn't available on their website, and just seeing the kinds of supports that's available to you. Because I think absolutely you want to make sure that you're going to a university where you're going to feel well supported. I don't think it's going to play against you that you need extra time in an exam. I think that's very, students having accommodations in exams is something that's commonplace. And so I wouldn't worry about that being a factor that's held against you. Are there any other questions? Oh, okay. Any good podcasts or websites to recommend on insights on the application process? That's a good question. And so obviously our website is a really good website, which I have to plug first. But another one that I like is College Essay Guy. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with College Essay Guy. As the name suggests, his focus tends to be on writing college essays, but he also branches out into all sorts of different other admissions related topics. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got a website. I wouldn't be surprised if he's got podcasts as well. I'm not certain. But those are some of my favorite ones. And then I'm trying to think. I know that University of Pennsylvania, somewhere, I can't remember where it is, but UPenn somewhere online has like an online course about applying to US universities. So it kind of takes you through this everything that I've been talking about tonight, but in more detail, and helps. It's like an online course about how to apply to a US university and like how to do research. It like gives you little exercises to help you think about what factors are important to you in the choosing process, and helping to identify what types of universities you're going to be looking at. So you might want to check. I can't remember if it was available through Coursera or something like that. And I'm not sure if it's been updated. It might be a little out of date at this point, but it's worth checking that out. Never been asked that question before. It's a good one. I realize that we're coming up on the end of time. And so if there's any other questions, feel free to kind of put those in now. Otherwise, as I said, feel free to kind of check in at the end of, or send us an email if you've got any questions, or come to our booth at USA College Day at the end of next week. and we look forward to welcoming you there. We are hosting another one of these sessions next week. It's going to be my colleagues hosting it, doing roughly the same information as I've done right now. If you're feeling really eager and wanted to just hear it from my colleagues, you're very welcome to attend. Otherwise, if you're interested in checking out some other information, I just recommend checking out our website or going to our YouTube channel and checking out the different admissions playlists that we've got available there. Well, thank you all for tuning in this evening, and I look forward to seeing you at College Day next week. Have a good night. Bye.